The grand, gleaming halls and echoing drawing rooms of the Gilded Age, a world of transatlantic opulence, where fortunes were traded for titles and young American heiresses known as dollar princesses crossed the ocean in search not only of recognition, but of a new life. There are jewels, silks, palatial homes, and golden candelabras, but there is also a silent peal of longing, of compromise, and, very often, of loss. Welcome to an immersive historical journey where you transport yourself across the seas and put yourself in the shoes of an American dollar princess just beginning her new life abroad, and the women who came after her, along with more fascinating history from the Gilded Age and beyond. This is a History for Sleep video. Enjoy! Imagine yourself beneath high painted ceilings. Hear the faint tick of the long case clock in the corridor. Feel the distant rumble of carriages rolling far below your window. As you slip into this hypnotic experience, expect to be guided through the true, unvarnished life behind the glittering surface, a life often ruled not by hearts, but by gold, duty, and the quiet ache for belonging. Picture yourself in a grand, unfamiliar bed, the echoes of a long journey still lingering in the quiet of a vast, ancient chamber, the last vestiges of your American life, the bustling streets, the familiar faces, the comforting sounds of home have faded into a distant memory, replaced by the imposing silence of a foreign castle. You are no longer the carefree daughter of a New York magnate, but now a duchess, a title that feels heavy and ill-fitting, a gilded crown that weighs upon your very soul. As the first hint of dawn touches the leaded panes, a new day, filled with its own set of duties and loneliness, is about to begin. As you wake to the insistent, frigid kiss of the morning air, a stark contrast to the gentle, comforting warmth of your childhood home in New York. Here, in the sprawling ancient castle that is now your prison, the very air feels different, heavier, colder, imbued with centuries of dust and unspoken expectation. Your breath condenses in a faint plume before you, a ghost of your own presence in this vast, echoing chamber. The silk sheets embroidered with a crest that is now yours but feels utterly alien, offer little comfort against the chill that seeps into your bones, a coldness that seems to originate not from the stone walls, but from deep within your own heart. You turn your head slowly on the goose-down pillow, the rustle of silk a whisper in the cavernous silence. Sunlight, thin and watery, struggles to penetrate the heavy velvet drapes, casting the room in a perpetual twilight. Even the light here is subdued, as if afraid to fully illuminate the truth of your existence. You can hear the distant clang of a bell from the village church, its mournful toll echoing through the valley, a sound that once felt quaint and romantic in your imagination, but now merely underscores your profound isolation. It is a sound that marks the passage of time, each chime a reminder of another day you must endure. The maid, a woman whose face is a mosaic of deep lines and whose eyes hold a perpetual, knowing weariness, enters without a knock. Her footsteps are soft, practiced, almost silent, on the worn Persian carpets that cover the stone floor. She carries a silver tray, laden with a delicate porcelain cup of lukewarm tea and a single dry biscuit. There is no warmth in her greeting, no flicker of recognition in her gaze beyond the perfunctory respect due to your title. You are simply the American wife, the one who brought the much-needed funds, the one whose presence is tolerated, not cherished. Her eyes, you notice, linger for a fraction too long on the simple cotton nightgown you wear, a silent judgment against the elaborate lace and silk she likely expects. You feel the subtle shift in the atmosphere, the unspoken appraisal of your manners, your choices, your very being. You sit up, the movement stiff, as if your limbs have forgotten how to be truly free. The tea is bitter, the biscuit tasteless, yet you consume them both, a ritual of sustenance performed without pleasure. Your stomach clenches, not from hunger, but from the familiar knot of anxiety that tightens with the dawn. Today, like every day, will be a performance. Downstairs, the castle stirs. The clatter of pots from the distant kitchens, the low murmur of servants' voices, the heavy thud of the main door as stable hands begin their work. These sounds filter up to your room, a symphony of a life that moves around you, yet never truly includes you. You are an observer, a patron, but never truly a participant. The silence in your own chambers, once a luxury, is now as thick as velvet curtains, muffling your own thoughts, trapping them within your skull. You dress in a gown of heavy brocade, the fabric stiff and unyielding, the color a deep, somber green that seems to absorb the light rather than reflect it. The corset, a formidable instrument of torture, laces you into an hourglass shape, a physical manifestation of the rigid expectations that bind you. Each breath is shallow, constrained, a constant reminder of the life you left behind, a life where you picnicked on the lawns of Newport, laughter came easily, and where your worth was not measured in acres or ancient titles. Breakfast is a solitary affair in the vast dining hall, a room so immense it feels like a museum. Your husband, the Duke, is already gone, off to attend to estate matters, a convenient excuse to avoid your company. His absence is a constant presence, a hollow space at the head of the table that speaks volumes. The array of silver cutlery gleams under the weak light, each fork, each knife, each spoon a potential trap. You remember the endless lessons your mother forced upon you before you sailed, the frantic attempts to teach you which fork to use, how to hold your teacup, how to navigate the labyrinthine etiquette of European aristocracy. Even now, a year into your marriage, you still feel a tremor of uncertainty, a fear of making a misstep, of confirming their unspoken judgments. The day stretches before you, an endless expanse of empty hours. You might wander through the cold, echoing corridors, your footsteps swallowed by the silence. Portraits of your husband's ancestors, their eyes stern and unyielding, follow you from the walls. Silent judges of your American vivacity, your lack of ancient lineage. You trace the faded patterns on the tapestries, the stories they tell of battles and triumphs that are not your own. You are a stranger in your own home, an intruder in a history that predates your very nation. Perhaps you will attempt to converse with the Dowager Duchess, your husband's mother. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, miss nothing. Her words are always polite, yet laced with a subtle condescension, a constant reminder of your foreignness, your newness, your lack of understanding of their ancient ways. She speaks of family traditions, of duties, of the importance of an heir, her gaze lingering pointedly on your still flat stomach. The pressure to produce a son, to secure the lineage, is a palpable weight, a constant hum beneath the surface of every interaction. It is the primary reason for your existence here, the unspoken contract that binds you. The gardens offer a brief respite, though even there formality reigns. Clipped hedges stand in rigid geometric patterns. Statues of forgotten gods gaze with blank eyes, and the air is thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. You walk the gravel paths, the crunch beneath your satin slippers a lonely sound. You miss the wild, untamed beauty of the American countryside, the vibrant colors of autumn leaves, the scent of pine needles after a summer rain. Here, even nature is tamed, constrained, mirroring your own existence. The ache that fills the hours is not a physical pain, but a deep, pervasive loneliness that settles in your chest, a quiet burden that presses down on your spirit. You try to read, but the words blur before your eyes. You try to play the piano in the grand salon, but the melodies sound hollow and discordant in the vast space, mocking your attempts at joy. Your fingers, once nimble and expressive, feel clumsy, as if they too have forgotten their purpose. Evenings are the worst. Dinner is a formal affair, often with other members of the Duke's extended family or local gentry. You sit at the Duke's side, a decorative accessory expected to smile, to nod, to offer polite, carefully rehearsed responses. Your accent, a vibrant echo of your American origins, is often mispronounced or met with a polite, bewildered silence. You feel their eyes on you, appraising your manners, your dress, your every gesture. You are a curiosity, a source of amusement, a means to an end. Your husband, when he speaks to you, does so with a detached politeness, discussing estate matters, social engagements, never touching upon anything personal, anything that might hint at affection or intimacy. His touch, when it occurs, is brief, formal, a perfunctory brush of fingers devoid of warmth. You are his duchess, his financial solution, but never his beloved. The bed you share is vast and cold, a silent testament to the chasm between you. You lie awake for hours, listening to his even breathing beside you, feeling the immense distance that separates your souls. The dazzling title, the ancient lineage, the grand castle, none of it is a shield against this profound isolation. You remember the lavish balls in New York, the vibrant music, the easy laughter, the genuine smiles. You remember dancing until dawn, your heart light, your spirit free. Here, a ball is a duty, a performance. You glide across the polished floors, your heavy gown rustling, your face a mask of polite composure. You exchange pleasantries, offer empty compliments, and feel the weight of countless eyes upon you, not admiring, but scrutinizing. The dazzling chandeliers dripping with crystal cast a harsh light on the gilded facades, revealing the cracks beneath. The quiet aftermath of such an event is even more chilling. The castle empties, the music fades, and you are left alone in the vast silence, the scent of wilting flowers and stale perfume clinging to the air. The contrast between the fleeting spectacle and the enduring emptiness of your life is a cruel joke. You find yourself retreating further into your own mind, your thoughts a constant companion, a refuge from the unbearable reality. You conjure memories of your childhood, of your father's booming laughter, your mother's comforting embrace, the scent of freshly baked bread from the kitchen. These memories are vivid, almost painful in their clarity, a stark juxtaposition to the muted colors and stifled emotions of your present. You remember the freedom, the sense of belonging, the feeling of being truly seen and loved. The constant performance, the need to conform, to suppress your true self, is slowly eroding who you are. You find yourself speaking less, laughing less, your once vibrant spirit dimming under the relentless pressure. The subtle loss of self is perhaps the most insidious burden. You are becoming a shadow of the woman you once were, a reflection of the expectations placed upon you. You look at your hands, once soft and unblemished, now calloused from the endless hours spent holding a needle during your forced embroidery lessons, a ladylike pursuit meant to fill your idle hours. You miss the feeling of holding a book, of turning the pages of a novel, of losing yourself in stories that transported you far beyond your gilded cage. But here, even your intellectual pursuits are deemed frivolous, a distraction from your true purpose. The castle itself feels like a living entity, its ancient stones breathing a silent judgment. The cold, damp air seems to seep into your very bones, a constant reminder of your foreignness. The tapestries on the walls, depicting scenes of medieval hunts and battles, feel like a constant reminder of a brutal, unforgiving past that you are now inextricably linked to, yet you are trapped in a world that clings stubbornly to its antiquated ways. You yearn for a simple conversation, a genuine connection, a moment where you can be truly vulnerable without fear of judgment, but here every word is weighed, every gesture scrutinized. You are a commodity, a means to an end, and your feelings are irrelevant. The wealth you brought, the millions of dollars that saved this crumbling estate, has bought you a title, a castle, and an unbearable loneliness. The future stretches before you, a bleak and endless vista. The primary expectation, the one that overshadows all others, is the production of an heir, a son, You feel the pressure like a physical weight, a constant whisper in your ear. Your body, once your own, now feels like a vessel, its sole purpose to fulfill this duty. The thought of bearing a child in this loveless union, of raising a son in this cold, formal environment, fills you with a quiet despair. You imagine a small, innocent face looking up at you, and you wonder if you will be able to shield them from the very loneliness that consumes you. The weight of tradition presses in from every side, a suffocating blanket. Every custom, every ritual, every unspoken rule is designed to remind you of your place, your subservience, your role as the American outsider. You are a gilded bird in a gilded cage, admired for your plumage, but never truly free to fly. You often find yourself standing at the tall, narrow windows, gazing out at the rolling hills, the distant forests, the small, huddled village below. The landscape is beautiful in a stark, unyielding way, but it offers no solace. It is a landscape that belongs to your husband's family, to centuries of their lineage, and you are merely a transient figure within it. The wind whispers through the ancient trees, a mournful sigh that mirrors the ache in your soul. You remember the vibrant energy of your American home, the easy laughter, the casual intimacy, the sense of possibility that permeated the very air. Here, possibility feels like a foreign concept, replaced by an unyielding sense of destiny, a path laid out for you that you did not choose. Your wealth, which once promised freedom and endless opportunities, has instead become the very chains that bind you. The silence of the castle at night is particularly oppressive. It is not a peaceful silence, but one that hums with unspoken secrets, with the ghosts of generations past. You hear the creak of old timbers, the rustle of mice in the walls, the distant hoot of an owl, sounds that only emphasize your solitude. You long for the familiar sounds of your childhood bedroom, the distant rumble of carriages on Fifth Avenue, the faint strains of music from a neighboring brownstone, the comforting murmur of your parents' voices from downstairs. Here, there is only the vast, echoing emptiness. You are a dollar princess, a term whispered behind cupped hands, a label that defines your entire existence. It speaks of a transaction, a cold exchange of wealth for title, a bargain struck between powerful families, with your happiness, your desires, your very soul deemed irrelevant. You are a living testament to the economic realities of a bygone era, a pawn in a grand game of social climbing and financial survival. The irony is not lost on you. You have everything by the world's standards: a title, a castle, servants, endless wealth. Yet you have nothing that truly matters: love, companionship, freedom, a sense of belonging. The gilded cage, for all its splendor, is still a cage. This, you realize with a sinking heart, is your life. This is the existence you have bought with your father's fortune. This is the price of a title, the cost of an ancient name. And as the sun finally breaks through the clouds, casting a brief, fleeting warmth across your face, you know that your duty, your obligation, your loveless marriage will continue, for you are a dollar princess, and your destiny is one of sacrifice, of a life lived for others, a life where the heart remains forever unfulfilled. Your story echoes the experiences of many young American heiresses of your era. Women like Consuelo Vanderbilt, born into immense wealth, found themselves similarly thrust into loveless marriages with European aristocrats, their fortunes used to prop up decaying estates and secure ancient titles. Consuelo, married to the Duke of Marlborough, became the Duchess of Marlborough, her life a glittering facade that often concealed a deep personal unhappiness and a constant struggle against the rigid expectations of her new world. Like you, she was a symbol of a transatlantic bargain, a woman whose immense wealth bought her a grand title, but at the cost of her own freedom and happiness. Now comes the time to delve into the complex narrative of Consuelo's existence as she reluctantly stepped into the formidable role of Duchess of Marlborough, a life shaped by duty and the echoing grandeur of Blenheim. A journey across the Atlantic, following the dazzling spectacle of her forced wedding, was a period of quiet dread for Consuelo, a transition from one gilded cage to another. Each day at sea brought her closer to a fate she had not chosen, the vastness of the ocean mirroring the immensity of the change in her life, each wave a reminder of the distance from everything familiar. The salty air, once invigorating, now felt heavy with unspoken anxiety. She would stand on the deck, gazing at the endless horizon, a profound sense of isolation settling in her heart, a premonition of the life that awaited her. Upon arrival in England, Blenheim Palace itself was a revelation and a shock. It was a monumental Baroque masterpiece, designed by Sir John Vanbrugh and Nicholas Hawksmoor, grander than anything she had ever imagined, its golden stone glowing under the English sky, a testament to centuries of power and prestige. Its sheer scale was breathtaking, with its grand portico, its vast courtyards, its intricate carvings, and the sheer number of its 187 rooms. The very air within its immense halls seemed to hum with history, a weight of generations that pressed down upon her. Yet, beneath the architectural splendor, there was a palpable sense of decay, a faint, musty scent of neglect that clung to the air, a chill that seeped into her bones. The Marlborough family's dwindling fortunes meant that many of its hundreds of rooms were cold, unheated, and sparsely furnished, their tapestries faded, their furniture worn, and the magnificent gardens, though still beautiful, showed signs of needing extensive care. The sheer overwhelming size of the palace, rather than inspiring awe, made her feel even smaller, more insignificant, a tiny figure lost within its immense crumbling history. She walked through vast echoing salons, her footsteps swallowed by the silence, the cold marble floors a constant reminder of the emotional chill that had settled around her. The scent of damp stone and ancient dust became the pervasive fragrance of her new reality. Her introduction to English aristocratic life was a crash course in rigid etiquette and subtle social codes that were far more intricate and unyielding than anything she had encountered in New York. The sprawling household, with its dozens of servants, operated on a system of strict hierarchy and unspoken rules. The butler, with his stern demeanor and knowing eyes, seemed to judge her every move. The housemaids, accustomed to the ways of old England, regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled skepticism, their hushed whispers following her through the corridors. Her American accent, her more direct manner, her very vivacity were often met with polite, bewildered silence or subtle disapproval from the older, more established members of the household, and, most notably, from the Dowager Duchess, her husband's formidable grandmother. The Dowager Duchess was a particularly stern figure, her eyes missing nothing, her words often laced with a quiet condescension, a constant reminder of Consuelo's foreignness, her newness, her perceived lack of understanding of their ancient ways. Consuelo felt constantly scrutinized, as if every breath she took, every gesture she made, was being evaluated against centuries of aristocratic precedent. She struggled with the intricacies of the English social season, the endless round of formal dinners, elaborate hunting parties, and country house visits, each demanding a precise performance of grace and decorum. The rhythm of these social engagements was relentless, a constant reminder that her life was no longer her own, but a series of obligations, a never-ending theatrical production where she was expected to play a role she had not chosen. The scent of damp tweed from the hunting parties, the clinking of crystal at dinner, the hushed whispers in drawing rooms, all contributed to an atmosphere of constant scrutiny and quiet judgment. She found herself perpetually on edge, her once spontaneous laughter replaced by a carefully modulated smile, her vibrant spirit slowly dimming under the relentless pressure to conform. Her relationship with the Duke, Charles Spencer Churchill, known as Sonny, remained distant and formal, a polite but hollow companionship that offered no solace. He was a man of duty, steeped in the traditions of his ancient family, but emotionally reserved, almost cold, his temperament as unyielding as the stone walls of Blenheim. He was intellectual, interested in politics, philosophy, and the meticulous management of his estate, but he lacked warmth or genuine affection for his young wife. Their conversations revolved around practical matters, the pressing need for funds to maintain Blenheim, the endless list of social engagements they were obliged to attend, the condition of the tenant farms, or the latest parliamentary news. There was little warmth, no shared laughter, no genuine intimacy, no tender words exchanged in the quiet moments. His touch, when it occurred, was perfunctory, a brief, formal gesture, devoid of affection, a mere acknowledgement of her presence as his Duchess. The vast cold bed they shared became a potent symbol of the immense emotional chasm between them, a silent testament to their loveless union. Consuelo often lay awake for hours in the cavernous bedroom, listening to the creak of the ancient timbers and the distant hoot of an owl, feeling the profound solitude that enveloped her. The glittering title, the ancient lineage, the grand palace, none of it could shield her from the deep ache of loneliness that settled in her chest, a quiet burden she carried day after day, a constant dull throb beneath the surface of her public smile. She yearned for a simple, heartfelt conversation, a moment of genuine connection, but his reserved nature and her own stifled emotions created an insurmountable barrier. The rhythm of their days together was a silent, agonizing dance of two souls moving in parallel, never truly touching. The primary expectation, the unspoken contract of their marriage, was the production of an heir. A son was paramount to secure the Marlborough lineage, to ensure the continuation of the ancient dukedom and the preservation of Blenheim Palace. The pressure was immense, a constant whisper in the air, a weight that pressed down on her spirit and her very being. In 1897, she gave birth to her first son, John Albert Edward William Spencer Churchill, Lord Blandford, who would later become the 10th Duke of Marlborough. 2 years later, in 1899, her second son, Lord Ivor Spencer Churchill, was born. While she fulfilled her duty to the lineage, the act of bearing children in a loveless union brought a complex mix of emotions. She loved her sons deeply, finding in them a source of genuine affection, warmth, and purpose that her marriage utterly lacked. Their small hands reaching for hers, their innocent laughter echoing through the grand halls, these were precious moments of unadulterated joy, tiny beacons of light in her otherwise shadowed existence. Yet she also felt a pang of sorrow that they were born into such a cold, formal world, a world where duty often overshadowed love, and she worried about their own future happiness, hoping they would find a different path than her own. She would hold them close, breathing in the sweet scent of their baby skin, a silent promise to protect their innocence from the harsh realities of their aristocratic inheritance. The rhythm of motherhood, though demanding and often isolating in such a vast household, offered a precious counterpoint to the relentless formality of her ducal life, a quiet sanctuary in a world of rigid expectations, a space where her heart could finally feel free to love. Despite her profound unhappiness, Consuelo embraced her duties as Duchess with remarkable diligence, compassion, and a burgeoning sense of purpose that extended far beyond the superficial demands of society. She was not content to merely be a figurehead, a decorative American import whose sole purpose was to provide funds and heirs. She poured her considerable intelligence, empathy, and organizational skills into improving the lives of the people who lived on the vast Blenheim estate, the tenants and villagers who formed the backbone of the ducal lands. The air in the local villages often carried the scent of poverty, dampness, and hardship, the pervasive smell of coal smoke, unwashed bodies, and inadequate sanitation. Consuelo was determined to alleviate these conditions. She established and funded schools, ensuring that the children of the estate workers received an education far beyond what was typically available to them, recognizing that knowledge was the true key to social mobility. She oversaw the construction of improved housing for the tenants, replacing dilapidated, disease-ridden cottages with more sanitary and comfortable homes, often personally inspecting the progress and ensuring proper ventilation and access to clean water. She built hospitals and clinics, providing much-needed medical care to a population that had previously lacked access to it, often paying for doctors and nurses out of her own allowance. She personally visited the sick and the poor in their humble homes, her gentle touch and kind words offering comfort and practical assistance where little had existed before. She organized soup kitchens during harsh winters and clothing drives for the destitute, her presence a beacon of hope in their often bleak lives. This philanthropic work became her true calling, a source of profound meaning and agency that her marriage could never provide. It was in these acts of service, in the grateful smiles of the villagers, in the tangible improvements she witnessed in their daily lives, that she found her true strength, a quiet defiance against the constraints of her gilded cage. The rhythm of her charitable endeavors, the steady progress she observed, the genuine connection she forged with the local people, these were the real treasures of her life at Blenheim, far more valuable than any jewel or title. The scent of disinfectant in the new clinics, the sound of children's laughter from the schoolrooms, the quiet gratitude in the eyes of a healed patient, these were the true rewards that nourished her spirit. The vast sums of American money that Consuelo brought to the Marlborough estate were indeed instrumental in its survival and restoration, but they were also a constant, tangible reminder of the transaction that had bound her. Her dowry, approximately $2.5 million, equivalent to over $80 million today, was immediately put to use. This included extensive repairs to the roof of Blenheim Palace, which was in danger of collapsing, threatening the very structure of the historic building. The magnificent gardens, originally designed by Capability Brown, were meticulously restored to their former glory, requiring immense investment in labor and plants. Modern amenities, still rare in such ancient estates, were installed, including plumbing and electricity, bringing the palace into the 20th century. The scent of fresh paint and newly polished wood began to replace the mustiness of decay in some parts of the palace, a testament to her family's financial intervention. Yet, despite this enormous influx of capital, the Duke's lavish spending habits and the sheer unending costs of maintaining such a colossal estate meant that financial anxieties remained a constant undercurrent. The rhythm of renovation, the endless stream of workmen and materials, was a background hum to her increasingly isolated existence, a constant reminder that her personal fortune was being consumed by the demands of a legacy that was not truly her own. She would often see the Duke poring over ledgers, his brow furrowed, even after her millions had been spent, a clear indication that the financial black hole of Blenheim was seemingly bottomless. Her relationship with her mother, Alva, was also a complex and often painful thread throughout these years, a constant struggle for Consuelo to assert her own identity and escape the formidable shadow of her mother's will. Alva, having achieved her social triumph by securing a ducal title for her daughter, continued to exert a powerful, controlling influence, even across the vast expanse of the Atlantic. Letters from Alva would arrive at Blenheim, filled with instructions, criticisms, and expectations, the ink almost smelling of her formidable will. She micromanaged Consuelo's social calendar, her wardrobe choices, and even her decisions regarding the upbringing of her children, often sending detailed directives from afar. Consuelo's attempts at asserting her own desires, her quiet pleas for understanding, her yearning for a mother's genuine affection, were often met with Alva's unyielding resistance and sharp rebukes. her words cutting like a whip. It was a constant struggle for autonomy, a battle waged in hushed tones and formal correspondence, a silent war of wills that chipped away at Consuelo's spirit. Yet, as the years passed, a subtle shift began to occur. Consuelo, through her quiet resilience, her growing self-awareness and her increasing confidence derived from her meaningful philanthropic work, slowly started to reclaim fragments of herself. She began to find her voice, albeit softly at first, daring to challenge her mother's dictates and make decisions that aligned with her own conscience. The gilded cage, though still present, began to feel less impenetrable, its bars perhaps a little wider, allowing her spirit more room to breathe. Alva, too, perhaps softened by age, by the burgeoning suffrage movement she championed, or by a belated recognition of her daughter's suffering, began to show glimpses of remorse, a rare crack in her formidable facade. The rhythm of their difficult relationship was a slow, arduous dance of wills, but one where Consuelo gradually found her footing, moving from a pawn to a player in her own life. The profound unhappiness within her marriage, exacerbated by the Duke's emotional distance and his increasingly public affairs, eventually led to a formal separation in 1906. The decision, though painful and fraught with societal implications, was a necessary step towards personal liberation. The public nature of the separation sent ripples through both American and European society, providing ample fodder for the gossip columns and fueling endless speculation. Divorce, especially among the aristocracy, was still largely taboo, viewed as a stain on a family's reputation and a threat to the established order, and the public scrutiny was intense. The air around her was thick with judgment and whispers, the dissecting of her private pain for public consumption following her wherever she went. The Duke, for his part, had also found solace elsewhere, engaging in affairs that further highlighted the chasm between him and Consuelo. His long-term relationship with Gladys Deacon, an American socialite who would eventually become his second wife, was an open secret that deeply wounded Consuelo, though she maintained a public facade of composure. Yet, she persevered, driven by a profound and unyielding need for personal freedom and genuine happiness. The legal process for divorce was protracted and emotionally draining, forcing her to relive the painful details of her forced union, the coldness of her husband, the suffocating control of her mother. Each legal hurdle was a test of her resolve, a reminder of the societal forces aligned against her, but with each step she felt a flicker of hope for a life truly her own. In a truly surprising and historically significant turn of events, Alva Vanderbilt, the very woman who had so ruthlessly orchestrated the marriage, played a crucial role in its annulment decades later. By 1926, Alva had transformed into a prominent suffragist and a more reflective, perhaps even remorseful woman. She testified before a Vatican tribunal, delivering a shocking admission that reverberated through the highest echelons of society. With a rare moment of public vulnerability, she confessed that she had forced Consuelo into the marriage against her will, even threatening to shoot Winthrop Rutherford, Consuelo's true love, if her daughter refused to marry the Duke. This extraordinary testimony, a public acknowledgement of her past cruelty, paved the way for the annulment of Consuelo's marriage to the Duke of Marlborough. The annulment, granted on the grounds of lack of consent, effectively declared the marriage null and void from its very beginning, as if it had never happened in the eyes of the Church. This act, while perhaps a belated attempt at atonement by Alva, finally freed Consuelo from the chains of her gilded past, releasing her from the religious and social bonds that had held her captive for so long. The civil divorce, finalized in 1921, and the subsequent annulment, marked a pivotal moment, a courageous act of defiance against the very forces that had shaped her life, allowing her to truly begin anew. The rhythm of her life was finally her own to compose, a symphony of her own choosing, unburdened by the discordant notes of her past. In her later years, Consuelo found a measure of the freedom and love she had so desperately craved. She married Jacques Balsan, a distinguished French aviator and industrialist, in 1921, shortly after her civil divorce from the Duke. Their union was a stark contrast to her first marriage. It was a relationship built on mutual respect, shared interests, and genuine affection. Jacques was a man of warmth, intellectual curiosity, and a gentle spirit, who admired Consuelo for her mind and spirit, not for her fortune or title. The air around them felt lighter, filled with the warmth of companionship, understanding, and shared laughter. They lived primarily in France, enjoying a life that was elegant but less burdened by the rigid formalities and suffocating expectations of English aristocracy. She found joy in their shared passion for art, culture, and travel, exploring the world together with a newfound sense of liberation. The rhythm of their life together was one of quiet contentment, a gentle melody after years of discord, a harmonious blend of intellect and affection, a true partnership that had eluded her for so long. Consuelo also dedicated herself wholeheartedly to philanthropic work, expanding upon the charitable endeavors she had begun at Blenheim, her compassion and drive for social improvement only deepening with her newfound freedom. During World War I, she worked tirelessly for the American Red Cross in France, establishing and managing hospitals for wounded soldiers. The scent of antiseptic and the sounds of suffering filled her days, but she faced them with unwavering resolve, her gentle touch bringing comfort to countless men. After the war, she focused particularly on children's charities in Paris, establishing orphanages and schools, providing opportunities for the most vulnerable. She was a tireless advocate for social reform, using her influence and resources to make a tangible difference in the lives of others, particularly women and children. Her commitment to these causes was unwavering, a testament to her deep-seated desire to alleviate suffering and promote human dignity, finding profound purpose in helping those less fortunate. In 1953, Consuelo published her autobiography, The Glitter and the Gold, a poignant and insightful reflection on her extraordinary life. In its pages, she candidly recounted the pressures of her upbringing, the misery of her first marriage, the suffocating weight of duty, and her eventual journey towards self-discovery and fulfillment. The book offered a rare and invaluable glimpse behind the glittering facade of the Gilded Age, revealing the human cost of social ambition and the profound personal sacrifices made by women like herself. Her prose was elegant and reflective, her voice clear and resonant, offering a nuanced perspective on a life often sensationalized. The scent of ink and paper, the quiet act of putting her story into words, was perhaps another form of liberation, allowing her to finally process and share the complex tapestry of her experiences. Consuelo Vanderbilt lived a long and impactful life, passing away peacefully in 1964 at the age of 87. Her final years were marked by a sense of peace and accomplishment, a quiet satisfaction in a life well lived, despite its early hardships. She had transcended the confines of her arranged marriage, forging a path of her own, a testament to the enduring human spirit's quest for authenticity and fulfillment. The rhythm of her later life was one of purpose and quiet contentment, a stark contrast to the gilded misery of her youth under the thumb of a domineering mother. She was no longer merely a dollar princess, a term that had once defined her existence, but a woman who had, through her resilience, compassion, and quiet defiance, truly claimed her own destiny. Her legacy is not just the millions she brought to a crumbling dukedom, but the quiet strength with which she navigated a life of immense privilege and profound personal sacrifice, ultimately finding her own measure of happiness and leaving a lasting impact on the world around her, a testament to the enduring power of the human heart to seek its own truth. Moving on, let us shift our gaze from the intricate world of unspoken feminine communication to the lives of the men these dollar princesses married. Imagine a different kind of gilded cage, one fashioned not from corsets and social strictures, but from the immense inherited weight of centuries of lineage, vast lands, and a title that, while dazzling, often masked the quiet hum of financial anxiety and a slow, insidious decay. These were the dukes, the earls, the marquises, men born into a world of unquestioned privilege, yet increasingly finding themselves adrift in a rapidly changing landscape, their power waning, their pockets often empty, and their very existence reliant on the influx of new American fortunes. This was the rhythm of their lives, a constant struggle to maintain appearances, to uphold a legacy that was both their birthright and their burden. Step into the world of the English aristocratic husband, a world defined by ancient stone and inherited grandeur. The air in their ancestral homes often carried the faint, earthy scent of damp, old books, and perhaps the lingering aroma of pipe tobacco and stale port. Their days began not with the urgent clatter of commerce, but with the quiet, measured pace of tradition. Imagine the sound of a distant stable boy leading horses for the morning ride, the crisp snap of a newspaper being unfolded in a vast, chilly breakfast room, the low murmur of servants going about their duties. For these men, life was a tapestry woven from inherited threads, a title that preceded their birth, lands that stretched for miles, and a social position that placed them at the very apex of society. The very sound of their names, resonant with history, Marlborough, Manchester, Roxburgh, carried the weight of generations, a constant reminder of their unearned but undeniable eminence. Yet, beneath this glittering surface, a different reality often simmered. The vast estates, though impressive on paper, were frequently neglected, their grand houses crumbling, their farmlands struggling. Imagine the sprawling acres of parkland, dotted with ancient oaks, their gnarled branches reaching towards a gray sky. Picture the elaborate formal gardens, once meticulously maintained, now showing signs of encroaching wildness, the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, more prominent than the sweet perfume of cultivated blooms. The sound of a leaky roof, the sight of peeling paint, the chill in the unheated halls, these were the quiet, persistent reminders of a dwindling fortune. The rhythm of decay was slow, almost imperceptible, but it was a constant, insidious presence, a silent threat to their inherited grandeur. The late 19th and early 20th centuries were a period of immense economic upheaval in Britain. The long agricultural depression, which began in the 1870s and lasted for decades, devastated the landed aristocracy. Falling rents, impoverished tenants, and cheap imports of grain from the Americas meant that the traditional source of aristocratic wealth was rapidly diminishing. Imagine the sight of uncultivated fields, the sound of empty barns, the quiet desperation in the voices of their estate agents reporting dwindling income. Simultaneously, the costs of maintaining vast properties like Blenheim Palace, with their hundreds of rooms, sprawling grounds, and legions of servants, were astronomical and ever increasing. New death duties and inheritance taxes, introduced in the late 19th century, further eroded inherited wealth, acting as a constant drain on capital. Each generation inherited not just a title and land, but also a mounting debt, a quiet burden that pressed down on their shoulders. The rhythm of their financial lives was a constant struggle, a desperate attempt to keep up appearances in a world that demanded outward splendor but offered little in the way of genuine income. It was this stark financial reality that made the dollar princess phenomenon not merely a social trend but an economic necessity. For these aristocratic husbands, their American wives were primarily sought for their immense fortunes, a golden key to unlock solvency and prevent the collapse of their ancient houses. The expectation was clear, if unspoken. The American bride would bring a dowry large enough to pay off debts, restore crumbling estates, and maintain the lavish lifestyle expected of their station. Imagine the quiet, almost clinical discussions between fathers and sons, or between agents and prospective grooms, where the financial assets of an American heiress were meticulously tallied, her beauty and personality secondary to her millions. The air in these negotiations was thick with the scent of ambition and desperation, a stark contrast to the romantic ideals of marriage. Beyond the financial, there was the crucial dynastic expectation, the need for an heir, the continuation of the family name. The unbroken line of succession was paramount. For centuries, the purpose of aristocratic marriage had been to secure lineage and consolidate power, and this remained largely unchanged, even as the world around them shifted. The pressure to produce sons was immense, a constant hum beneath the surface of their lives, a duty that overshadowed any personal desires or emotional connections. Imagine the quiet tension in the marriage bed, the unspoken expectation that hung in the air, the relief or perhaps disappointment with each new birth. The rhythm of their lives was inextricably linked to this biological imperative, a constant reminder of their primary role as custodians of a legacy. The daily lives of these aristocratic husbands, particularly those who were not deeply engaged in politics or military careers, often revolved around a carefully curated set of leisure pursuits. These activities served not only as entertainment, but also as vital social rituals, reinforcing their status and providing a structured escape from the quiet anxieties of their financial realities. Hunting was perhaps the most quintessential aristocratic pastime, a deeply ingrained ritual that connected them to generations of their ancestors. Imagine the crisp, cold air of an English autumn morning, the scent of damp earth and horses, the excited baying of hounds echoing across the vast estate. The sound of the hunting horn, sharp and clear, signaled the start of the chase. Dressed in tweed and riding boots, with the scent of leather and gunpowder clinging to their clothes, these men would spend hours on horseback, pursuing fox or stag across their own lands or those of their neighbors. It was a physically demanding activity, requiring skill and endurance, but it was also a powerful symbol of their dominance over the land and their adherence to ancient traditions. The camaraderie among the men, the shared thrill of the chase, the hearty meals and copious drinks that followed, these provided a sense of belonging and purpose that was often absent in their domestic lives. The rhythm of the hunt, from the early morning preparations to the triumphant, or sometimes disappointing, return, was a deeply comforting and familiar pattern. Fox hunting in particular was a highly ritualized affair, far more than a simple pursuit of prey. It was a social spectacle, a test of horsemanship, and a powerful demonstration of status and connection to the land. The morning began early, often before dawn, with the meet, a gathering of the hunt, resplendent in their scarlet coats, known as pinks, white breeches, and polished boots, their horses steaming in the cold air. The sound of hooves on gravel, the excited whinnying of horses, the low murmur of conversation, and the sharp, eager cries of the hounds created an atmosphere of anticipation. Breakfast, often a lavish affair of hot dishes and champagne, would precede the hunt, a final moment of conviviality before the serious business began. The master of foxhounds, markhounds, commanded the proceedings, his authority absolute, guiding the hunt across fields, over hedges, and through woodlands, often with the permission or tacit acceptance of landowners. The thrill came not just from the chase itself, but from the daring jumps, the mastery of the horse, and the shared experience of navigating the challenging terrain. The scent of damp earth, horse sweat, and the sharp tang of the countryside filled the air as they galloped across the landscape. For many aristocratic husbands, it was a profound connection to their heritage, a visceral link to generations of their forebears who had ridden the same lands. It was a demonstration of physical prowess, a chance to escape the stifling formality of drawing rooms, and a vital opportunity for male bonding and networking, solidifying social and political ties in a uniquely English way. The rhythm of the chase, the pounding of hooves, the baying of hounds, the exhilaration of the gallop, these were moments of pure, unadulterated freedom for men often constrained by duty. Gambling was another pervasive pursuit, offering both excitement and, for some, a desperate hope for a quick financial reprieve. Imagine the hushed, smoke-filled rooms of exclusive gentlemen's clubs or private country house card tables. The soft clatter of chips, the rustle of cards, the low murmur of voices punctuated by the occasional sharp intake of breath or a quiet expletive. The air would be thick with the scent of stale cigars, whiskey, and the metallic tang of nervous anticipation. Baccarat, bridge, and poker were popular games, where fortunes could be won or lost in a single night. For men burdened by debt, the allure of quick money was intoxicating, even as the risks were immense. The quiet desperation beneath the veneer of nonchalance was palpable. The rhythm of the cards being dealt, the tension building with each hand, the sudden release or crushing disappointment, these were the sharp, unpredictable moments that broke the monotony of their prescribed lives. Beyond the formal card games played within the decorum of a club, gambling often extended to more illicit and high-stakes ventures. Horse racing, a passion for many aristocratic men, was a particular magnet for heavy betting. Imagine the roar of the crowd at Epsom Downs or Ascot, the thunder of hooves on the turf, the scent of grass and nervous excitement filling the air. Fortunes could be wagered on a single race, and the outcome could mean the difference between solvency and ruin. Private betting rings, often operating outside official channels, facilitated even riskier wagers, sometimes involving entire estates or vast sums of inherited wealth. The pressure to maintain appearances, coupled with a deep-seated belief in their own luck or superior judgment, often drove these men to increasingly reckless wagers. The rhythmic thud of a bookmaker's hammer signaling a finalized bet, or the frantic scribbling of figures in a ledger, underscored the high stakes involved. This pursuit of quick gains, born of both boredom and financial desperation, often led to a spiraling cycle of debt, forcing many to sell off family heirlooms, land, or even timber from their ancestral forests, further eroding the very foundations of their inherited wealth and contributing to the quiet decay of their houses. The social acceptance of gambling within aristocratic circles was a curious paradox. While excessive gambling leading to ruin was certainly frowned upon, a certain degree of risk-taking was considered a mark of a gentleman, a display of nonchalance. In the face of financial peril, it was woven into the fabric of their leisure, a thrilling counterpoint to the rigid formality of their public lives. However, the consequences could be catastrophic. Many a family fortune was squandered on the turn of a card or the speed of a horse, leaving wives and children to face penury or forcing them into even more desperate dollar princess marriages to replenish depleted coffers. The hushed whispers of scandal, the quiet shame of a family forced to sell a beloved painting or a parcel of land, were the bitter fruits of this pervasive pursuit. The rhythm of their lives, for some, became a relentless, desperate chase for the next win, a futile attempt to outrun the inevitable consequences of their inherited burdens and their ingrained habits. Gentlemen's clubs in London were sanctuaries, bastions of male privilege and tradition. These institutions, many with roots stretching back to the 18th century coffee houses, had evolved into formidable bastions of the British establishment. Imagine stepping through the heavy oak doors, often unmarked save for a discreet brass plaque that swung silently shut, muffling the sounds of the bustling city outside. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old leather from countless armchairs, polished mahogany, and the faint, lingering aroma of aged spirits and pipe tobacco. The lighting was often subdued, casting long shadows across the walls adorned with ancestral portraits and hunting trophies. These clubs, like White's, founded 1693, Brooks's, 1762, or the Carlton, 1832, provided a refuge from the demands of domestic life and the intrusions of the outside world. Here, men could socialize freely, discuss politics, read newspapers, and conduct business among their peers without the constant scrutiny of wives or society matrons. The murmur of male voices, the clinking of glasses, the soft rustle of pages turning in the reading room, these sounds created an atmosphere of quiet exclusivity and profound comfort. Within these hallowed walls, the activities were varied, yet steeped in ritual. A typical day might see a gentleman arrive mid-morning, perhaps after a ride in Hyde Park, to peruse the morning papers in the hushed silence of the reading room, the faint scent of newsprint filling the air. He might then move to the smoking room, enveloped in the rich aroma of cigars and conversation, to exchange the latest gossip or political intelligence. Lunch would be a formal, yet often solitary affair in the dining room, followed by a game of billiards in a room where the rhythmic click of ivory balls was the only sound, or a serious hand of bridge or whist in the card room, the soft rustle of cards, and the quiet clatter of chips punctuated by focused silence. Some members would conduct business in the private meeting rooms, their hushed tones discussing land deals or investments. Others might simply doze in a comfortable armchair in the drawing room, the gentle warmth of the fireplace a comforting presence. The clubs also offered luxurious amenities, private bathing facilities, barber services, and even a postal address for their correspondence. Valets would often attend their masters at the club, bringing fresh clothes or running errands. It was a space where the strictures of home life, with its feminine influence and domestic demands, could be entirely shed. The benefits derived from these clubs were multifaceted. They offered an unparalleled sense of belonging and camaraderie, a vital psychological refuge for men who often felt isolated by their titles and responsibilities. They were informal centers of power, where political alliances were forged, business deals struck, and careers advanced through quiet conversations and shared confidences. The exchange of information, from market trends to parliamentary gossip, was invaluable. They reinforced the social hierarchy, as membership was highly exclusive, often requiring multiple sponsors and a unanimous vote, ensuring that only men of the right sort gained entry. For the aristocratic husband, the club was an extension of his identity, a place where his status was affirmed, his opinions respected, and his leisure indulged. The rhythm of club life, from the morning papers to the late-night discussions over a final brandy, was a comforting and predictable routine, a vital part of their social and professional existence, a quiet fortress against the changing world outside. While some aristocratic men engaged actively in politics and parliament, holding seats in the House of Lords or even the House of Commons, many others merely held their positions by birthright, with little genuine interest in governance. Imagine the echoing chambers of Parliament, the sound of debates, the rustle of official papers, the formal address of my lords. For those who were politically inclined, it was a platform to exert influence and uphold their class interests. For others, it was simply a duty, a means to maintain their status and connections, rather than a passionate pursuit. The rhythm of parliamentary sessions, the formal dinners and debates, was another expected part of their public performance. Indeed, the role of the aristocracy in British politics was undergoing a significant transformation during this period. While the House of Lords, composed primarily of hereditary peers, still held considerable power, particularly in delaying legislation passed by the elected House of Commons, its influence was slowly but steadily waning. The Parliament Act of 1911 would famously curtail the Lords' power to veto money bills and reduce their power to delay other legislation, a stark symbol of the shift in political authority towards the more democratic lower house. For many hereditary peers, their attendance in the House of Lords was a sporadic affair, often limited to significant votes or debates that directly impacted their class interests, such as land reform or taxation. The vast majority of the legislative work was carried out by a smaller, more dedicated corps of peers. Imagine the cavernous, often sparsely populated benches of the House of Lords, the faint dust motes dancing in the shafts of sunlight, the drone of a speaker's voice, sometimes passionate, often tedious. For some, it was a stage for grand pronouncements, a chance to shape the nation's destiny. For others, it was a mere formality, a place to sign their names and then retreat to the more compelling pursuits of the country estate or the London Club. The scent of old leather and parliamentary parchment filled the air, a mix of history and dusty routine. The rhythm of their political engagement was often a slow, deliberate dance, a constant struggle to maintain relevance in a world that was increasingly looking beyond their ancient privileges. Affairs and mistresses were a common, though often unspoken, aspect of their lives, a stark contrast to the strict moral codes imposed upon their wives. Discretion was paramount, and these relationships were conducted with a quiet secrecy, often facilitated by discreet London townhouses or secluded country cottages. The scent of forbidden perfume, the rustle of hushed conversations, the clandestine meetings, these were the sensory details of a separate, hidden life. While their wives were confined by the expectations of duty and dynastic continuity, many aristocratic husbands sought emotional or physical solace outside their loveless marriages. This double standard was widely accepted, if never openly acknowledged, a quiet hypocrisy woven into the fabric of their society. The rhythm of these separate lives, though often carefully managed, was a constant struggle to maintain secrecy, a quiet rebellion against the emotional emptiness of their official union. The prevalence of extramarital affairs among aristocratic men was a complex phenomenon, deeply rooted in the social mores and expectations of the era. Marriage, for the aristocracy, was primarily a strategic alliance, a means of securing lineage, consolidating wealth, and maintaining social standing. Love and emotional compatibility were often secondary if considered at all. Men were raised with a sense of entitlement and a belief that their personal desires, particularly sexual ones, were separate from their marital duties. Society, while outwardly condemning infidelity, often turned a blind eye to a gentleman's indiscretions, as long as they were conducted with the utmost discretion and did not bring public scandal upon the family name. The air in their private circles was often thick with unspoken understanding, a shared acceptance of this double standard. The privileged lives they led allowed for this duality, a public face of impeccable decorum and a private world of clandestine liaisons. These affairs often involved women from the demi-monde, actresses, opera singers, or professional courtesans who operated on the fringes of polite society. These women, while socially ostracized, often possessed a wit, charm, and independence that was lacking in the tightly constrained world of aristocratic wives. Imagine the allure of a smoke-filled private box at the opera, the scent of a courtesan's exotic perfume, the freedom of conversation that transcended the polite strictures of the drawing room. For some men, these relationships offered emotional intimacy, intellectual stimulation, or simply a physical outlet that their arranged marriages could not provide. The discreet London townhouses, often rented specifically for such purposes, became havens of forbidden pleasure, their windows darkened against prying eyes, their interiors filled with the hushed sounds of secret rendezvous, the rustle of a silk gown, the clinking of champagne glasses, the low murmur of intimate conversation. These were the sensory details of a life lived in the shadows, a constant struggle to maintain secrecy. The impact of these affairs on the American wives, the dollar princesses, was often devastating, contributing significantly to their profound loneliness and disillusionment. They had entered these marriages with the hope of finding love, or at least companionship, only to discover their husband's emotional and often physical absence. Consuelo Vanderbilt, for instance, found her marriage to Charles Spencer Churchill, the 9th Duke of Marlborough, to be emotionally barren. Despite her efforts to fulfill her duties and manage Blenheim Palace, Sonny, as he was known, remained cold and distant. He was known to have several affairs throughout their marriage, including a long-term relationship with Gladys Deacon, an American socialite who would eventually become his second wife. Imagine Consuelo, alone in the vast, echoing halls of Blenheim, the the scent of decay mingling with the faint, lingering scent of her husband's cigar smoke, knowing he was elsewhere, seeking solace or passion with another. The pattern of her days was punctuated by this quiet heartbreak, a constant struggle against the crushing weight of his indifference. Another notable example was William Montagu, the 9th Duke of Manchester, who married Helena Zimmerman, a wealthy American heiress. The Duke was a notorious spendthrift and gambler, and his life was a whirlwind of dissipation and debt. He had numerous affairs, often with chorus girls and other women from the theatrical world, squandering Helena's immense fortune on his extravagant lifestyle and his mistresses. Imagine the rustle of bills, the frantic letters from solicitors, the quiet shame as Helena watched her inheritance disappear, knowing it was being spent on fleeting pleasures with other women. The scent of cheap perfume on his clothes, the late-night returns, the hushed whispers of servants, these were the constant reminders of his infidelity and her financial ruin. The pattern of their marriage was one of constant conflict and emotional pain, a stark illustration of the devastating consequences of such aristocratic double standards. These were not isolated incidents. They were a systemic part of an aristocratic culture that prioritized lineage and appearance over genuine affection and fidelity, leaving a trail of heartbreak in its wake. When it came to estate management, many aristocratic husbands adopted a largely detached approach, raised to rule and lead, not to manage the mundane details of agriculture or finance. They often delegated the day-to-day running of their vast properties to professional estate agents. Imagine the scent of old ledgers, the frustrating numbers, the endless reports that landed on their desks, often to be skimmed rather than deeply analyzed. The Duke might ride across his lands, observing the fields and tenants, but the practical decisions about crops, rents, and repairs were left to others. This distance from the land and the tenants meant they were often ill-equipped to adapt to the changing economic realities of the late 19th century. The languid aspect of their engagement with their estates was often one of receiving reports and signing documents, rather than active hands-on management. This detached approach to the very source of their wealth was not merely a matter of preference. It was deeply ingrained in their upbringing and the aristocratic ethos. From a young age, these men were educated in classical subjects, history, and the arts, preparing them for a life of public service, military command, or simply the refined leisure expected of their station. Practical matters of finance and agriculture were considered the purview of clerks, bailiffs, and agents, men of a lower social standing. The very idea of a peer of the realm dirtying his hands with the intricacies of farm accounts or tenant grievances was often seen as undignified, almost vulgar. Imagine a young lord, fresh from Eton or Oxford, his mind filled with Greek philosophy or Latin verse, suddenly confronted with a complex balance sheet or a detailed report on crop yields. The scent of ink on parchment, the dry rustle of figures would feel alien, uninteresting, even beneath him. This ingrained aversion to practical management meant that many estates were run inefficiently, clinging to outdated agricultural methods and failing to diversify their income streams. While the Industrial Revolution transformed Britain, many landed estates remained stubbornly rooted in a pre-industrial agrarian economy, missing opportunities for investment in burgeoning industries like railways, coal, or manufacturing. The nature of their education, focused on leisure and classical learning, ill-prepared them for the harsh realities of economic change. The consequences of this detachment were profound and far-reaching. While the estate agents, often highly competent, did their best, they frequently lacked the ultimate authority or the capital to implement necessary reforms or investments. Tenants, facing falling prices for their produce, struggled to pay rents, leading to increasing arrears and a growing sense of grievance. Imagine the quiet desperation in the voices of the tenant farmers, their pleas for reduced rents falling on the ears of an agent who could only relay messages to an absent lord. The great houses themselves often suffered, with essential repairs deferred year after year, leading to the crumbling ancestral home syndrome that became a hallmark of the era. The sound of rain dripping through a damaged roof into a silver basin, the sight of cracked plasterwork, the chill of unheated rooms, these were the physical manifestations of financial neglect. Forests were over-harvested, land was sold off piecemeal, and valuable art collections were quietly liquidated, all to maintain the illusion of wealth and to fund the aristocratic lifestyle. The systematic progression of decline, though slow, was relentless, a constant erosion of their inherited capital. This situation was exacerbated by the aristocratic code of honor, which often dictated that a gentleman should not appear concerned with money. To discuss finances openly was considered uncouth, a sign of being in trade or, worse, vulgar. This cultural aversion to financial transparency meant that problems often festered unseen, only to become crises. Many a young lord inherited a seemingly grand estate only to discover, through his agents, a mountain of hidden debt and a shrinking income. The quiet hum of financial worry, often suppressed, was a constant companion, leading some to desperate measures, including heavy gambling or seeking quick, lucrative marriages. The scent of desperation, though masked by an air of nonchalance, permeated the very fabric of their lives. There was a strong resistance to innovation and quiet adherence to old ways, even as they led to further financial decline. New agricultural methods, industrial ventures, or modern business practices were often viewed with suspicion or outright disdain, perceived as vulgar or beneath their station. The scent of tradition, the comfort of the familiar, often outweighed the necessity of adapting to a changing world. This deep-seated conservatism, while preserving ancient customs, inadvertently hastened their economic decline, making them increasingly reliant on external sources of wealth. The measured pace of their decision-making was often slow, deliberate, and rooted in the past, a constant struggle against the tide of modernity. This resistance was not merely a passive reluctance but an active cultural phenomenon, deeply tied to the very identity of the landed gentry. The aristocracy's power and prestige had historically been rooted in land ownership and the traditional social order it upheld. Innovation, particularly in industry or finance, was seen as the domain of the new rich, the self-made men who lacked the inherited lineage and refined sensibilities of the old guard. To embrace such changes would be to acknowledge the diminishing relevance of their own class and to adopt the practices of those they considered their social inferiors. Imagine the disdain in a peer's voice as he dismissed a newfangled agricultural machine or a proposal for a railway line crossing his estate. The very notion of such progress, an affront to his sensibilities. The scent of old money and established order was a powerful deterrent to anything that threatened the status quo. This cultural inertia meant that while other nations and social classes embraced the advancements of the industrial age, many aristocratic estates remained mired in antiquated practices, their grand houses operating much as they had for centuries, further widening the economic chasm between them and the burgeoning industrial and financial elite. The pulse of their lives, steeped in tradition, resisted the accelerating pace of the modern world, a silent, stubborn stand against the inevitable. The decline of traditional power and wealth was a pervasive undercurrent in their lives. The long agricultural depression had eroded the very foundation of their wealth, and the rise of powerful industrialists and financiers in both Britain and America signaled a fundamental shift in the social hierarchy. Men like the Vanderbilts, though lacking ancient titles, commanded immense financial power, and their influence was growing. Imagine the subtle resentment in the air, the quiet feeling of being superseded by those they once considered beneath them. The aristocracy's inherent authority and their traditional role in national life were slowly diminishing, replaced by the rising power of the mercantile and industrial classes. The structured beat of a world moving past them, a quiet, insistent drumbeat, was a constant source of anxiety. Psychologically, these aristocratic husbands carried an immense burden of lineage. They were born into a legacy that demanded constant upkeep, both financially and socially. The expectation to maintain the family name, to preserve the ancestral estate, and to uphold centuries of tradition was a crushing weight. Imagine the portraits of their ancestors gazing down from the walls, their stern eyes a constant reminder of the expectations they bore. The quiet dread of failure, the fear of being the generation that allowed the ancient house to fall, was a constant companion. The tempo of their lives was dictated by this inherited responsibility, a constant struggle to uphold a crumbling legacy. This inherited privilege often fostered a deep sense of entitlement. Born into a world where their needs were met without question, many lacked a true understanding of hard work, financial prudence, or the realities faced by those outside their insulated sphere. They were accustomed to deference and luxury, and the idea of adapting to a changing economic landscape was often alien. The ceremonial flow of effortless existence, once a given, was now challenged, leading to frustration and a quiet sense of bewilderment. Beneath the veneer of nonchalance and aristocratic composure, many experienced a quiet desperation. The reliance on their American wives' fortunes, while necessary, was often a source of quiet humiliation and resentment. It was a stark reminder of their own diminishing power and their inability to sustain their lifestyle independently. This dependence could breed a subtle bitterness, directed perhaps at their wives or at the changing world that had forced them into such a position. The cadence of their internal lives was often a frantic, silent struggle against these feelings of inadequacy. Finally, their upbringing often instilled a profound emotional detachment. Raised in environments where displays of emotion were discouraged and personal relationships were often secondary to duty and social standing, many struggled to connect deeply with their wives or even their children. The absence of warmth in their marriages was not always a sign of malice, but often a product of their conditioning. The silence in their hearts, a learned suppression of feeling, mirrored the quiet formality of their grand homes. This emotional distance, while perhaps a coping mechanism, contributed to the profound loneliness experienced by their American wives. The languid current of their emotional lives was often a quiet, unexpressed longing, buried beneath layers of duty and decorum. In conclusion, the lives of the English aristocratic husbands, while outwardly privileged, were often a complex tapestry of inherited grandeur and quiet decay. Their days were shaped by ancient traditions, leisure pursuits, and the immense burden of maintaining a legacy that was increasingly difficult to sustain. Their reliance on American fortunes was a stark testament to the erosion of their traditional power and wealth in a changing world. They, too, inhabited a gilded cage, one built from the weight of their lineage and the quiet desperation of diminishing resources. The time-worn cycle of their lives, though outwardly composed, was a constant struggle against the tides of modernity, a silent battle to preserve a fading world. Their story, intertwined with that of the dollar princesses, paints a poignant portrait of an era where wealth and title danced a complex, often heartbreaking waltz. Let us now move forward in time. You are a woman in the era progressively known as the rise of the new woman. It is 1898, and the air, thick with the scent of coal smoke and damp earth after a spring shower, feels charged with an unspoken promise. You stand at the threshold of a new century, the gaslight flickering outside your window casting long, dancing shadows across the floral wallpaper of your childhood bedroom. Your corset, a familiar cage of whalebone and tightly laced cotton, presses against your ribs, a constant, gentle reminder of the expectations that bind you. But tonight, A different kind of pressure thrums beneath your skin, a restless, insistent longing that refuses to be contained. You trace the intricate patterns of the lace on your nightgown, the delicate threads, a stark contrast to the robust, unyielding ambition blooming within you. Around you, the world is a symphony of familiar sounds. The distant clatter of a horse-drawn carriage on cobblestones, the murmur of your parents' voices from downstairs, a hushed, rhythmic cadence that speaks of routine and predictable futures. For young women like you, the path is clear, well-trodden. Debutante balls, a suitable match, a grand wedding, and then the quiet, dignified reign over a well-appointed household. This is the long-established gilded cage for those of your class, polished and seemingly comfortable. But your mind, a restless hummingbird, flits beyond these prescribed boundaries. You remember Aunt Eleanor, her laughter a brittle chime, her eyes often holding a distant, almost mournful quality. She was a dollar princess, married off to a minor English lord decades ago. Her American fortune exchanged for a title that, in family circles, was often whispered about as a misfortune. You recall the hushed conversations during Sunday dinners, the way your mother would sigh, "Poor Eleanor, she had no choice," forced into that arrangement. And what did it get her but a drafty castle and a husband who preferred his horses to his wife? The words, sharp as shards of glass, had embedded themselves in your young mind. You'd seen the faded photographs of her in elaborate gowns, her smile a painted mask, and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty castle. The title trap, as your more cynical cousin once called it, was beginning to lose its shimmering allure, revealing itself as a hollow, echoing chamber. You wanted substance, not just glitter. The scent of old paper and leather, a comforting, almost intoxicating aroma, pulls you from these musings. Tucked beneath your mattress, a forbidden treasure awaits. A worn copy of Mary Wollstonecraft's 1792 essay, A Vindication of the Rights of Woman, smuggled in from the local library under the guise of a novel. Its pages, brittle with age, feel like a secret handshake with a kindred spirit across time. You light a small candle, its flame a defiant beacon against the encroaching darkness of convention. The words leap out at you, bold and revolutionary. Let women share the rights, and she will emulate the virtues of man. A tremor runs through you, not of fear, but of recognition. This is the language of your own burgeoning soul. The next morning, the crisp autumn air bites at your cheeks as you walk towards the public library, your steps imbued with a newfound purpose. The scent of damp leaves and distant wood smoke fills your lungs, invigorating you. The library, a grand imposing edifice of red brick and carved stone, feels less like a building and more like a portal. Inside, the hushed reverence of the reading room is a balm to your often overstimulated senses. The soft rustle of turning pages, the faint scratch of a pen, the low murmur of whispered conversations. It is a sanctuary for thought. You seek out books on philosophy, science, and the nascent field of sociology, subjects deemed unsuitable for a young lady. Your fingers glide over the spines, each title a promise of knowledge, a key to unlocking the world beyond your drawing room. The rough texture of the library's wooden tables beneath your fingertips feels solid, real, a stark contrast to the delicate porcelain of your mother's teacups. Your decision to pursue higher education, whispered first to your bewildered parents, then declared with a quiet, steely resolve, was met with a mixture of disbelief and thinly veiled disapproval. "A woman's place is in the home," your father had boomed, his voice a thunderclap that usually silenced all dissent. But this time, something within you refused to bend. Your mother, her face etched with a familiar worry, spoke of the unnaturalness of it, the way it might spoil your chances. You felt their words like tiny, sharp pebbles thrown against a burgeoning wall, but the wall held. The desire for a purpose beyond domesticity, A life carved by your own hands was too strong to be deterred. The day you arrived at Vassar College, the air was electric with anticipation, a vibrant hum that resonated deep within your bones. The grand Gothic architecture of main building loomed against the cerulean sky, its stone walls whispering tales of women who had dared over the past decades to dream beyond the ordinary. The scent of freshly cut grass mingled with the faint, sweet perfume of lilac bushes, a heady blend that spoke of new beginnings. You remember the rough wool of your new traveling suit, a practical garment that felt like a uniform for this new chapter. Your roommate, Shirley Vance, a spirited girl from Boston with eyes that sparkled with intelligence, greeted you with an outstretched hand and a smile that banished any lingering trepidation. "Welcome to the revolution," she declared, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. The camaraderie was immediate, a powerful current that flowed between you and the other young women who had converged here, each carrying her own quiet rebellion. You shared cramped rooms that smelled of starched linens and ambition, late-night discussions fueled by strong tea and even stronger ideas, the clatter of cutlery in the dining hall, the rush of footsteps in the corridors, the collective sigh of relief after a difficult lecture. These sounds became the soundtrack of your awakening. In the lecture halls, the scent of chalk dust and old wood was ever present, a tangible reminder of the knowledge being imparted. Professor Albright, a woman with a formidable intellect and a kind smile, spoke of Darwin and Spencer, of the burgeoning field of psychology. Her words were not just facts, they were keys, unlocking new ways of seeing the world, challenging the very foundations of your upbringing. You felt your mind expand, stretching like a muscle long unused, the effort exhilarating, the crisp rustle of your notebook pages as you furiously scribbled notes, the rhythmic tap of Professor Albright's pointer against the blackboard. These were the sounds of your liberation. You tasted the bitter tang of intellectual struggle, but also the sweet satisfaction of comprehension, of a new idea taking root. The idea of a pursued profession began to solidify in your mind, no longer a vague yearning but a tangible goal. You saw women like Jane Addams pioneering social work, and Elizabeth Blackwell breaking barriers in medicine. The world was changing, and you were determined to be a part of its remaking. You chose teaching not as a last resort, but as a deliberate act of empowerment, to shape young minds, to instill in them the same hunger for knowledge and independence that now consumed you. This was a purpose that resonated deeply. After graduation, the bustling energy of New York City embraced you, a stark contrast to the quieter academic groves. Your small, rented apartment in Greenwich Village, though modest, was entirely your own. The rough brick of the buildings outside your window, the cacophony of street vendors, trolley cars, and distant ferry horns. It was a symphony of urban life, raw and invigorating. You learned to navigate the crowded sidewalks, the press of bodies a constant reminder of the city's vibrant pulse. The taste of a hot pretzel from a street vendor, salty and satisfying, was a small victory, a symbol of your newfound independence. Your days were filled with the lively chatter of your students, their eager faces a constant source of inspiration. The scent of freshly sharpened pencils and ink filled your classroom, a comforting aroma that spoke of learning and growth. You taught not just facts, but critical thinking, encouraging your girls to question, to explore, to dream beyond the confines of their era. You felt the smooth, cool wood of the ruler in your hand, not as an instrument of discipline, but as a tool to point towards new horizons on the blackboard. Evenings were spent with a new circle of friends, other new women of the era, as British writer Sarah Grand coined you. Journalists, artists, suffragists, their minds as sharp and their spirits as fierce as your own. You debated politics, art, and the future of women over cups of strong coffee in smoky cafes. The clinking of cups, the passionate voices, the shared laughter, it was a symphony of intellectual camaraderie. You felt the rough texture of the cafe's wooden tables beneath your elbows, a grounding presence amidst the swirling ideas. The bitterness of the coffee, strong and dark, mirrored the intensity of your discussions. You witnessed the broader societal shifts firsthand. The suffrage movement, which began at the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848, has gained momentum. Now is your time to join women marching in the streets, their voices rising in a powerful chorus for the right to vote. You joined them, your feet pounding the pavement alongside thousands of others, the collective energy a palpable force, the feel of the protest banners, rough fabric against your gloved hand, the rhythmic chant of "Votes for Women" echoing through the city streets, the scent of determination in the air. These were the sensations of a revolution unfolding. You saw the sneers of some onlookers, the dismissive waves of others, but you also saw the growing numbers, the unwavering resolve in the eyes of your sisters, the juxtaposition of the elegant hats and tailored coats of the marchers against the raw, almost primal roar of their collective demand was a powerful image that etched itself into your memory. There were moments, of course, when doubt, like a cold, insidious tendril, would try to twine itself around your heart. The loneliness of forging a new path, the occasional pang of longing for the simpler, more conventional life your peers embraced. You'd see old school friends, now wives and mothers, their lives seemingly complete, and a fleeting shadow of uncertainty would cross your mind. Was this fierce independence truly worth the sacrifices? The quiet of your apartment late at night, broken only by the distant wail of a train, could sometimes feel vast and empty. You trace the cool glass of your window pane, watching the city lights twinkle like scattered diamonds, and wonder if you were truly shining or merely adrift. But then, the memory of Aunt Eleanor's brittle laughter, the image of those painted smiles, would resurface, a stark reminder of the title trap you had so deliberately avoided. You'd remember the exhilaration of intellectual discovery, the satisfaction of a student's sudden understanding, the vibrant camaraderie of your friends. And the doubt would recede, replaced by a quiet, unwavering conviction. The freedom to choose, to learn, to contribute. This was a treasure more valuable than any inherited title or gilded cage. You stand now, at the dawn of the 20th century, a woman transformed. The corset, once a symbol of constraint, is now a distant memory, replaced by looser, more comfortable clothing that allows for movement, for action. Your stride is confident, purposeful, your head held high. The light in your eyes is not the demure flicker of a sheltered girl, but the steady, bright flame of a woman who has found her own way, forged her own path. The quiet satisfaction that settles in your heart is a taste sweeter than any confection, a feeling more profound than any fleeting societal approval. You are the new woman, not a fragile blossom to be admired, but a resilient, unfurling bloom, pushing through the hard earth of expectation, reaching for the sun. The world still has its challenges, its prejudices, its battles to be fought, but you face them with a spirit tempered by education, a heart fortified by purpose, and a soul emboldened by freedom. The future, once a nebulous concept, now stretches before you, a vast open landscape waiting to be explored, shaped, and lived on your own terms. You are not just a woman, you are a force, a tribute to the power of a dream realized, a pioneer on the ever-expanding frontier of the American progressive era, as was the very real new woman of the era in our next segment. The year is 1907, though your story, Crystal Eastman, begins long before the crisp autumn air of Washington Square Park settles around you on this momentous day. You carry the legacy of generations, a vibrant thread woven from the intellectual curiosity of your Vassar-jaculated mother, Annis Ford Eastman, and the fervent social justice convictions of your Congregationalist minister father, Samuel Elijah Eastman. Their home in Elmira, New York, was no quiet parsonage. It was a crucible of ideas, a vibrant salon where discussions on women's suffrage, labor rights, and temperance crackled like static electricity in the air. You remember the scent of ink and old paper from your father's study, mingling with the faint, sweet aroma of your mother's baking from the kitchen. These were the scents of your childhood, a fragrant blend of domesticity and radical thought. Unlike many girls of your era, you were not merely encouraged to learn, you were expected to question, to challenge, to articulate. Your older brother Max, a constant intellectual sparring partner, pushed you further, his quick wit sharpening your own. You devoured books, not just novels, but treatises on economics, philosophy, and law, the words leaping from the pages igniting a fire in your belly. You were born into the cusp of a new century, a time when the rigid corsets of Victorian society were beginning to loosen, both literally and figuratively. The new woman was not just a phrase, she was a nascent force, a whisper growing into a roar. You saw her in the pages of magazines, in the determined eyes of college-bound girls, in the growing clamor for the vote. And you, Crystal, were destined to be one of her most eloquent embodiments. Your path to New York University Law School was not merely a choice. It felt like an inevitability, a natural extension of the intellectual hunger your parents had so carefully nurtured. The journey from Vassar to Columbia for your master's in sociology, and then to NYU Law, was a deliberate march away from the prescribed domestic sphere, each step a declaration. You felt the subtle stares, the raised eyebrows, the quiet skepticism of those who believed a woman's place was anywhere but a lecture hall filled with men discussing torts and contracts. But their doubts were mere background noise to the insistent drumbeat of your own ambition. The law school itself was a cavernous echoing space, smelling of old wood, dust, and the metallic tang of ambition. You were one of a handful of women, a stark minority in a sea of dark suits and hushed, competitive whispers, the scratch of pens on paper, the low murmur of professors' voices, the rustle of turning pages. These were the sounds of your daily grind. You sat, often in the front row, your spine straight, absorbing every legal precedent, every nuanced argument. You felt the weight of expectation, not just your own, but that of every woman who dared to dream beyond the drawing room. Each successful answer, each incisive question you posed, felt like a small victory for your sex. And now it is 1907. The air is crisp, carrying the distant rumble of horse-drawn carriages and the faint, acrid scent of coal smoke from the city's countless chimneys. You stand, a cap and gown heavy on your shoulders, the rustle of the fabric a counterpoint to the thumping of your heart. The faces in the crowd blur, your parents, beaming with pride. Max, a mischievous glint in your eye. Friends, some curious, some genuinely admiring. As you walk across the stage, your name, Crystal Eastman, rings out, clear and resonant. The diploma, a crisp official document, feels substantial in your hand, a tangible representation of years of relentless study, of countless late nights hunched over textbooks, the glow of a gas lamp illuminating intricate legal texts. It is more than a piece of paper. It is a key, a weapon, a declaration. You are a lawyer, one of the few women of your time to hold such a title. The weight of it settles on your shoulders, a responsibility you eagerly embrace. A quiet hum of conversation follows you as you descend the steps. You catch snippets. Remarkable young woman. A lawyer, imagine that. What will she do next? You smile, a private, knowing smile. They wonder what you will do next. You know. You will not merely practice law, you will wield it. You will not merely observe the world, you will change it. The ink on your diploma is barely dry, but already your mind races with possibilities, with injustices to right, with voices to amplify. The future, vast and brimming with challenges, stretches before you, and you, Crystal Eastman, are ready to meet it head-on. The ink on your diploma may have been barely dry, but the city of New York, a sprawling, pulsating beast of industry and humanity, was already calling. You didn't seek the quiet confines of a traditional law firm, the hushed offices filled with dusty tomes and polite, often condescending male colleagues. No, your legal training was a tool, a lens, through which to examine the raw, often brutal realities of industrial America. Your first major assignment, a groundbreaking investigation for the Russell Sage Foundation into industrial accidents, plunged you into a world far removed from the polished lecture halls of NYU. The air in the factories you visited hung heavy with the metallic tang of machinery, the acrid bite of chemicals, and the pervasive smell of sweat and fear. You walked through workshops where unguarded belts whirred menacingly, where molten metal hissed and spat, where the screams of injured men were a grim, all too frequent punctuation mark to the relentless clang of hammers and the roar of furnaces. You interviewed the injured, their faces etched with pain and resignation, their stories a litany of shattered bones, lost limbs, and lives irrevocably altered. You spoke to widows, their eyes hollow with grief, their homes cold and empty now that the breadwinner was gone. You saw the stark contrast between the glittering mansions of Fifth Avenue and the squalid tenements where these workers, the backbone of America's burgeoning industrial might, eked out a precarious existence. The injustice burned within you, a hot, insistent flame. Your legal mind, honed by years of study, meticulously documented every detail: the lack of safety regulations, the paltry compensation, the systemic indifference of factory owners. You felt the rough texture of calloused hands, heard the hacking coughs of men whose lungs were filled with dust, tasted the bitterness of their despair. This wasn't just data, it was human suffering, and you, Crystal Eastman, were determined to give it a voice. Your 1910 report, Work Accidents and the Law, was a searing indictment, a meticulously researched argument for workers' compensation laws that would shift the burden from the injured individual to the industry itself. It was a proof of your belief that the law could be a hammer, not just a shield, for the vulnerable. In 1913, the call came from the federal government itself, a summons to Washington, D.C., to serve as an investigative attorney for the U.S. Commission on Industrial Relations. You felt the immense gravity of this appointment, a national stage where your findings could genuinely shift the tides for millions. The Commission's hearing rooms were imposing, hushed spaces, often smelling faintly of polished wood and stale cigar smoke. Each morning, as you settled into your seat at the long, heavy table, the thick stacks of official documents felt cool and smooth beneath your fingertips, a tangible representation of the lives held within their pages. You listened intently, the drone of testimony occasionally punctuated by the sharp rap of a gavel, your gaze fixed on the faces of the witnesses. The weary factory worker describing a maimed hand, the tight-lipped owner defending his profits, the passionate union leader pleading for dignity. You felt a surge of adrenaline as you rose to cross-examine, your questions not just legal probes, but carefully crafted instruments designed to chip away at evasions, to expose the raw truth of exploitation. You could almost taste the tension in the air as you laid bare evidence of preventable accidents, of wages that barely sustained life, of human beings treated as cogs in a vast machine. It was a quieter, more methodical battle than the street protests, fought with facts and legal precision, but as your findings were woven into the Commission's final report, you knew, with a deep, quiet satisfaction, that each word was a brick laid in the foundation of new federal labor policies, slowly, painstakingly, improving workplace safety standards across the nation. This was legal work as a full-fledged activist, a personal demonstration of the power of the pen and the persistent voice. The year 1912 pulled you away from the bustling intensity of New York and Washington, D.C., drawing you westward to the rolling farmlands and burgeoning cities of Wisconsin. You arrived not as a lawyer or an investigator, but as the campaign manager for the state's suffrage referendum. This was a different kind of fight, one waged not in courtrooms or hearing rooms, but on dusty roads, in small town halls, and across countless kitchen tables. You felt the chill of early morning air as you boarded trains, the rhythmic clatter of the wheels on the tracks a constant companion. The scent of damp earth and distant wood smoke filled your lungs as you traveled from Milwaukee to Madison, from Green Bay to La Crosse. You organized rallies, your voice growing hoarse from repeated speeches, the cheers and applause of sympathetic crowds a balm to your weary spirit. You debated opponents, their arguments often steeped in tradition and prejudice, your mind sharp, your rebuttals swift and logical. You saw the hopeful faces of women, young and old, their eyes shining with the promise of equality, and felt the quiet determination of men who believed in justice. Though the referendum ultimately failed, the experience solidified your understanding of the grassroots struggle, the relentless effort required to chip away at deeply entrenched societal norms. It was a baptism by fire in the messy, exhilarating world of political organizing, and it deepened your commitment to legal and political equality for women, not just in theory, but in the lived reality of every American woman. Later that same year, the suffrage movement caught hold of you once again as a vibrant, often fractious force, gaining momentum, and you found yourself drawn back into its passionate embrace, marching down Fifth Avenue, the crisp autumn air now filled with the determined chants of women, their purple, white, and gold sashes a vibrant ribbon against the gray city buildings. The rhythmic thump of marching feet, the defiant call and response of slogans, the occasional jeers from onlookers, these were the sounds of a movement demanding its rightful place. You felt the surge of solidarity, a powerful current connecting you to thousands of other women, each one an embodiment to the new woman ideal. You saw faces from all walks of life, factory workers alongside society matrons, teachers beside artists, all united by a common cause. The scent of trampled leaves and the faint perfume of the women around you mingled with the exhilarating tang of collective purpose. You held banners aloft, your arms aching but your spirit soaring. This was not just about the vote. It was about full citizenship, about dismantling the invisible walls that confined women to the domestic sphere. The peace movement, too, became a central pillar of your work, especially as the shadow of war lengthened across Europe. The horrors of the Great War, with its senseless slaughter and widespread destruction, filled you with a profound sense of urgency. You saw the young men, fresh-faced and eager, marching off to what they believed was glory, only to return broken if they returned at all. The newspapers screamed headlines of battles and casualties, the ink bleeding across the pages like spilled blood. You joined other women, many of them suffragists, who understood the intrinsic link between peace and women's rights, in advocating for an end to the conflict. You spoke at rallies, your voice clear and unwavering, arguing against the jingoism and the drumbeat of war. You felt the chill of public disapproval, the accusations of being unpatriotic, but you held firm. The world needed a new way, a way of diplomacy and understanding, not endless cycles of violence. The air in these peace meetings was often thick with the smoke of cigarettes and the fervent, sometimes desperate hope for a better future. He tasted the bitter coffee served at late-night strategy sessions, fueled by an unwavering commitment to a world free from the ravages of war. By 1917, the United States was on the brink of entering the war, and the atmosphere in the country was charged with a fierce, often intolerant patriotism. Dissent was increasingly viewed as disloyalty, and civil liberties were under unprecedented attack. It was in this crucible of fear and repression that you, alongside others who shared your unwavering commitment to fundamental rights, recognized a critical need. The idea had been simmering for months, a quiet urgency among those who saw the erosion of free speech and assembly. The small, unassuming office where the National Civil Liberties Bureau, NCLB, was born smelled of fresh paint and nervous energy. The light, filtering through the grimy city windows, cast long shadows as you and your co-founders huddled around a makeshift table. There was Roger Baldwin, his quiet determination a steadying presence, Jane Addams, her wisdom a guiding light, and a handful of others, their faces grim but resolute. The air crackled with the weight of the moment. You felt the rough wood of the table beneath your fingertips, a grounding sensation amidst the swirling uncertainty. The conversation was intense, punctuated by the scratch of pens as notes were taken, by the rustle of papers outlining the nascent organization's mission. You discussed the plight of conscientious objectors, the suppression of anti-war protests, the arbitrary arrests and deportations. The NCLB, you all agreed, would be a bulwark against this tide of repression, a defender of the constitutional rights that were being so carelessly trampled. It was a bold, even dangerous undertaking. In a nation gearing up for war, you knew the risks, the potential for public scorn, even legal repercussions. But the alternative, silence in the face of injustice, was unthinkable. The NCLB, the precursor to the mighty ACLU, was not just an organization, it was a defiant statement, a beacon of hope in a darkening landscape. It was a proof of your belief that even in times of crisis, the principles of liberty and justice must be upheld. You had moved from documenting individual suffering to building a systemic defense of freedom, a profound shift that cemented your place as a central figure in the fight for civil liberties. The journey from Elmira to this small office, from a hopeful law student to a tireless advocate, had been long and arduous. But every step had led you to this vital moment. The fight was far from over, but with the NCLB, you had forged a new weapon in the ongoing battle for a more just and equitable America. So ends our journey into the inner lives of real people in history who have intrigued us, inspired us, or perhaps simply entertained us as we drifted off to sleep. You can look forward to more immersive history videos to fall asleep to as our channel moves in this new direction. Thank you for watching, and of course, sweet dreams.